Good afternoon. I'm Ann Aylward, Director of USDOT's Volpe National Transportation Systems Center, and I'm delighted to welcome you to the third event in our 8-part thought leadership series on delivering the benefits of the bipartisan infrastructure law, brought to you by the new U.S. Department of Transportation's Project Delivery Center of Excellence. We are happy to see so many attendees from across the transportation enterprise engaged in this series. Today's discussion is focused on innovation at the municipal level, and our guest experts will offer illustrations of how cities are reinventing project delivery and having an impact. I'd like to thank the 3 speakers that are joining us today. Todd Gloria, Mayor of San Diego, Eric McFarlane, First Deputy Commissioner, New York City Department of Design and Construction, and Kyle Wagenschutz, Urban Mobility Planner and Community Organizer with CityThread. Today, we will hear from all 3 speakers and then have one question and answer period following the speakers' remarks. Please type any questions you may have in the Q&A box. And if you are directing your question to a particular speaker, please include that as well. At the launch of our new Project Delivery Center of Excellence and this series 2 weeks ago, Secretary Pete Buttigieg remarked that now is the best chance probably in our lifetimes in the United States to transform our transportation systems for the better, to make communities safer, to make transportation cleaner, to advance equity, and to connect people to the resources, opportunities, and jobs that are going to shape their lives. Today, we have the opportunity to hear from 3 individuals who have been working at the city level across multiple agencies and municipalities to do just that. It is my pleasure to welcome our first speaker, Kyle Wagenschutz. All yours, Kyle.
Thank you, Anne, and hello to everyone. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are joining us today. While my slides get loaded up here, I just want to thank the Volpe Center for inviting CityThread to be a part of this. We're a national nonprofit working with municipalities across the country, and are really thrilled to sort of share some of the findings that we've had exploring and experimenting with cities about how to increase the speed at which they're building and completing mobility networks. And most of our experience and work has been in helping communities think about active transportation, bicycling, walking, accessing public transportation in big ways. But what we're also discovering is the same strategies that we're using to help advance bicycle networks in cities are also the same strategies that cities are beginning to sort of think about how they deliver all sorts of public space projects. Next slide, please. One of the joys that we have in working with local communities is that we get to meet and work with people on the ground who are trying to tackle really big challenges, and those challenges sometimes are the challenges that many cities across the country and around the world face every single day, whether we're talking about population increasing, traffic congestion, climate change, economic development. There's this shared sense of challenges that U.S. communities are attempting to tackle. And we all know, I think everyone joining this call today, because we work in the transportation and mobility space, we know that transportation and mobility touch all of these issues in really real ways. And yet, in some ways, our cities, because of how long it takes to implement transportation projects in our communities, we're not actually realizing the benefits that transportation could have at helping us tackle these challenges. And when CityThread began working on this work with cities, we initially thought that maybe the challenge of project delivery has to do with funding, or maybe it has to do with procedural, bureaucratic process needs to be streamlined and improved. Maybe it has to do, with whether or not the ambitions of our projects were too small or too large. And what we uncovered, rather than those being sort of like the primary challenges cities face, is that cities were very rarely being too ambitious, and funding and technical and procedural challenges were very rarely the major roadblocks. Really, what we discovered in communities is that there was a misunderstanding between important community stakeholders about how to advance the projects. That misunderstanding led to projects and their designs being pretty small in scale, offering only sort of meager amounts of connectivity. That in turn allows a small group of people who are opposed to any kind of change to really sort of get a foothold in public media and on social media with at city council meetings, begin to sort of have them begin to think about how to oppose this work in real ways. And our leaders within our cities, both elected, our city staff, really lack the persuasive communication tools needed to help communicate, why these kinds of changes to our streets benefit everyone. Next slide, please. And so CityThread began working with 5 cities back in 2019 to develop a new program that we call the Accelerated Mobility Playbook. We call it AMP for short. And this is really a playbook that isn't about designing a better bike lane, having a better construction process, thinking about reforming procurement. All of those kinds of activities happen as a part of this, but really it's about reestablishing short-term goals and visions for a community, making sure that all the community partners that we need to be a part of this work are a part of this work, engaging new community partners in new ways, thinking about the role of local philanthropy in our communities, thinking about how our community organizations, our nonprofits, our local advocacy groups can become supporters and extensions of the work of the city. And then launching into a project delivery process that is consistent and predictable. And there's so much sort of built into that, in terms of like how we're actually delivering the work is really, really important. Next slide, please. And at the heart of this strategy of accelerating this work is really communication, and that's communication amongst the community partners, making sure that the people that should be in support of this work and should be excited about these potential outcomes are working in the same direction. It's about communication to the public writ large. What are the kinds of communications that people are receiving about the projects that are actually happening? Is it a newspaper that's telling them, that city leaders are destroying economic activity by widening the sidewalk? Or is there a voice out there saying, this is really amazing for the city? Are we investing in paid media? Do we have professionals working in earned media, making sure that the message that we want to sort of portray about these projects is actually happening? And so CityThread's work in this is really about shifting the ways in which all of these community partners communicate with each other and externally to people in the community, utilizing the same kinds of paid media strategies that you would run to run a political campaign or to promote a product, tapping into a vast media network and tapping into local grassroots organizations to help carry that message further. Next slide, please. And the results of that in our first 5 cities were pretty remarkable. Here's an example of Austin, Texas, who was working to build out their bicycle network. And in only 24 months, they completed 115 miles of brand new bikeways. And that's introducing the projects, doing a full, robust community engagement process, going through all of the internal contracting, procurement, execution, implementation to ribbon cutting in only 24 months. Next slide, please. And you'll see here in the photos that we're not talking about just going out with the striping truck and laying some bicycle lanes down. We're talking about major reconstruction to achieve big, bold, ambitious goals for mobility. Creating separated space for cyclists and cars, adding new enhancements for people walking or using mobility devices, creating new places to integrate with public transit, and upgrading all of the existing safety devices needed and used by people who are driving cars. It's about respecting all of these modes and doing so in a way that's comprehensive and fast. Next slide, please. It's not just Austin, who has, frankly, a lot of money and a lot of resources. It's also cities like Pittsburgh, who added 50 miles in only 24 months. Next slide. The same kind of ambition was demonstrated in Pittsburgh as was Austin. Leaders there began sort of thinking about their existing bicycle network, their existing plans to put in place. Next slide, please. And we're able to to achieve comparable results to Austin. The last city here to sort of show you today is Providence, Rhode Island, which created 43 miles of bikeway. And I'll tell you that when we began working in Providence, there was next to no sort of active transportation infrastructure in place. They had just completed their very first, citywide plan for doing this work. And then Mayor Alorza made, creating great streets network a focus of his time in office. Next slide, please. And it's been met not just by the creation of a new cycling network throughout the city, but you can see in this photo, which is taken from the same spot just a few years apart, massive amounts of new development, massive amounts of new residential and economic activity happening throughout the entire city. Next slide, please. And what's really amazing about this work is that all three of these cities that I've shared with you here today were able to rapidly advance, the completion of their planned networks. Austin right now is on track to complete its planned network by 2025. And I've often had a conversation, sometimes tongue-in-cheek, talking with communities about what does it mean when a community actually completes its plan? Like what realistically happens when you hit 100%? I think you start over and you make a new plan and you figure out what the next stage actually is. But it's a place in which very few American communities have actually ever gotten to, completing their transportation plan. And it poses a question about if we can move quickly. Maybe that's a question that we need to have answered more in the future. There's a little arrow here on the bottom left of the screen that I just wanted to show you all. This wasn't done begrudgingly throughout the community. In fact, the reason this work actually works is because people support this work. One of the primary tenets of our work, of understanding the relationships between partners, understanding how to sort of communicate this really effectively, is understanding where public opinion exists within communities. We utilize surveys of registered voters in these communities to consistently, over time, check in and ask questions. Do you support building these plans? Do you want safer places to walk, to bicycle, to access public transit? Do you believe that this is really important for the city to do? Do you support this work, even if it means removing on-street parking, even if it means changing the way automobile lanes are designed? Do you support this work in the face of the construction and the time it's going to actually take? Sometimes what we tend to do in cities is we don't really always want the answers to some of those questions. But we find that it's really helpful and actually really powerful to actually know where the public actually stands. And so I can tell you with confidence that we are 100% certain that in Austin, 78% of registered voters there want to see this work being done. They want to see it being done even in the face of the trade-offs that they know have to come. And that's both a powerful tool for our city staff, who are oftentimes just hearing from people who are not happy about what's happening. It's empowering for our elected leaders, for the same reason, but to also continue to have them engaged in this process over time. And what it means that you can actually do is that many of the delays that we experience in cities related to, how the speed of implementation really aren't sort of procedurally or operationally based. Many of the delays are around nervousness about what we're doing the right thing and how quickly can we actually move. And I can tell you that when you answer some of those questions, when you have a great team surrounding you and supporting you, that you can move much faster. Austin doubled the pace that it was on to sort of build out its network. Pittsburgh and Providence increased the pace by 8 or 9 times their normal view. Next slide, please. And so I just want to remind everyone and say that this isn't a strategy that just large communities are actually doing. It's a simple playbook that scales up and down no matter the size. CityThread's currently engaged with 10 other communities across the U.S. that are utilizing this playbook today, and they range in size from communities that are 15,000 people, small towns that have city manager systems of government, all the way up to cities exceeding 1 million people that we read about in the news every single day. And the solutions here are really not bound to what a city's ambition actually is. It's really bound to the ways in which community partners, and those of us working in municipal government can improve our relationships and begin to sort of move faster once we've identified where we actually want to go and how we're going to get there. And so with that, I just want to say thank you to everyone. I'm looking forward to the Q&A later, and I'll turn it back over to you, Anne.
Excuse me. Thank you very much, Kyle. We very much appreciate your sharing your hands-on experience of successful projects in communities across the U.S. Next up is Eric McFarlane, First Deputy Commissioner, New York City Department of Design and Construction. Eric?
Yes. Good afternoon or good morning, all. And could I have the slide, please? There we go. All right, next slide, please. So I'm Eric McFarlane, First Deputy Commissioner for the Department of Design and Construction. And next slide. All right, so New York City already, this is recent news, they have been allocated almost $987 million from the federal infrastructure funding. And we plan basically by the end of the year to our application, our requests will be $2.5 billion in competitive federal funding application. Now, in order to do this, we have to create a task force. Could we go to the next slide, please? So it turns out in the city of New York, you have all the different agencies that you see here that do capital work. And all of them have projects that could be qualified for the funds. So we have the city hall and the deputy mayor for operation had to basically consolidate, create a shared task force to actually coordinate all these different requests that are coming from all different agencies. As you can see, the Department of Design and Construction is in the middle of this, and I'll explain in a minute. Next slide, please. So, and one of the things that they had to do, the City Hall, the task force, to basically standardize the request for funding, because all these agencies normally are not familiar with all the procedures. So that's one of the, as you can see in a summary, that's basically the steps that we took to actually consolidate and coordinate all the requests. Next slide, please. So the New York City Department of Design and Construction, right, is the city primary construction manager. We manage a portfolio of almost $30 billion in design and construction work on behalf of over 20 city agencies. In the past, I guess in the 90s, when this agency was created, each of these agencies used to do their own capital program, which was a bit of a chaotic, because essentially you had the police department doing architecture and civil work and all these different, which really is not their focus. For example, police, that's the clearest one, where it is really not their focus, their mission. So the city decided to create the Department of Design and Construction to manage the portfolio of all these agencies. Next slide, please. And basically what we do, we are, as I said, we design, we get the scope of work from the sponsor agencies, we call them, and we basically retain a consultant to do the design, or we do a design in-house. We have the capability also, and build the job out and manage the construction. We basically deliver a project in every part of the city, and basically this project obviously enhance every neighborhood and ultimately the life of more than 8.5 million New Yorkers. The pictures that you see here on the upper left is one of the first design build contract that we put out. This project is a garage, and it's basically talking about an $80 million garage, and that includes many things. And we did by using design build method. The design started in basically March of 21, and the construction completion was about June of 23. So basically, an $80 million project which we designed and delivered in about 14 months, which is, and this is one of the first design build project that we do in the city. On the upper right, that's our normal infrastructure work, which is basically a big sewer that we're putting in the ground, and that's done by design build method. So basically, a project like that, given the size of this project, would from design to construction, you talk about a 4 to 5 year process. And if you look at the lower right, what you see here is a police precinct that we are building. Essentially, it is let me see, it's a $65 million construction, and it's being done by design build, which is basically you contracted for the design, then you contract for the construction, and of course you have all the procurement process, all that stuff. So basically, we started the design in 2014, and we are basically projecting that will end this November, total completion of this project, which is about what, 9 years. So which is a good thing to contrast with the upper project, which is the garage, which is $70 million, over $70 million in 14 months, as opposed to another $65 million, which basically are using the standard method of construction and design construction, and it took about 9 years. By the way, the building that you're looking at here is a fancy police precinct. It's part of our design excellence program, where we retain top architect to actually design this building. So it's pretty impressive to look at. And if you look at the lower right, these are the field hospital that we built during COVID in the city, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Next slide, please. So what you are looking at here is essentially the East Side Coastal Resiliency. After Sandy, which this entire northeast area was devastated, including this part of Manhattan, the east side of Manhattan. And we basically, a project was, so HUD established a competition, and this project was a winner by the firm Bjorg, Engel, and Group, with BIG, who won this thing, and the design is based on this. It's about it's a $2.5 billion project that's in construction right now, and 2.4 miles long. And basically, the interesting thing about this is that the design was based on sea level rise, global warming aspect of, and the associated sea level rise that is predicted based on studies that have been done. This is basically one of the largest coastal resilience project in the nation based on these kind of criteria. Next slide, please. So one other thing that we are doing here is that we are trying to improve our capital project delivery process. And we have this group, the so-called blueprint, which basically we have a continuous focus on planning better, designing better, and building better. Next slide, please. So one of the, again, as part of this blueprint, the strategic blueprint is improving design. We basically partner with architects to improve our design. Our fee curves are higher. You know, this is the old adage that you get what you pay for. So we got to pay, if you want a better design, and so you have to pay a little more. And our design duration is shorter, and provide a new set of tools like master specification. Next slide, please. And also, this is a regular sewer project. And again, we are partnering with the builders to improve the construction. One of the things that we've done is that normally, as part of our standard process, we don't actually, of course, you cannot have a project in the street without expecting change orders. So the way it used to be, the standard process is that you have to basically put a change order and wait for it to be registered in order to secure the money, the funding, and wait for it to be registered. That's a lengthy process. So we have developed what is called expanded work allowance and incentive for early completion. What the expanded work allowance is that we put in the contract a certain amount of contingency to deal with change orders. There are all kind of procedures to actually access that fund, but nevertheless, the money is there in the contract, so we don't have to go through the lengthy procedure of trying to get a change order registered before we can do the work. Next slide, please. Of course, design build. This is basically the picture you're looking at here is the garage I just talked about, and basically we are doing right now. We have about 19 projects, over $8 billion is more and more in the pipeline, where we are using design build, the design build program. Next slide, please. So, in anticipation of all the infrastructure money in projects that we expect to come down our way, the city created this the capital project reform task force, where we looked at all the stuff that all the procedure or processes that we use in our procurement and to deliver a project. And we discovered there are about 30 cities, the city by themselves can actually do the reform and improve the process. But there are 9 projects, nine issues that we need legislative package. We need the state approval. For example, alternative delivery method, which is, for example, design build. We had to get this authorization from the state to do this. And of course, MWBE, and of course, DDC authority means that right now we like regular city agencies. So, but as an authority, we'll be able to bypass we'll be able to actually select our own delivery method, the right tools that we can put, we can deal with with every project like emergency every day. Next slide, please. And the alternative delivery method we're talking about is essentially, we're talking about, besides design build, there's progressive design build, there's CM build, CM address. This tool has been used successfully in private sector and other public owners nationwide, except that now, in order to have this in New York City, I need a legislative approval. I need the state to authorize this. Next slide, please. And again, we created an MWE mentoring and wrap-up insurance. We got this. We actually can authorize to do this. Where we are trying to increase the pool of minority contractors that can do this work. Faster procurement, design and construction with fewer redundant steps. This is the alternative delivery method that we're talking about. And we believe that will save months and years and millions of dollars in essential work. Next slide, please. And with this, I thank you very much, and I turn this back over to the panel.
Thank you very much. It's particularly interesting to hear how you manage project delivery in New York City, and I look forward to the opportunity to pose questions and answers. But first, as our final speaker, I'd like to welcome San Diego Mayor Todd Gloria. Mayor Gloria, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Ann, and thank you so much for this opportunity. It's great to be included in this series to hear about the reforms taking place at local level to drive the change that we all want to see. Appreciate our federal and state partners, can't do it without them, but of course, local is where so much of this change happens. I will say Kyle and Eric are hard acts to follow. I'll do my best to give a bit of the view from San Diego. I brought some slides with me this morning, and if those can be queued up, what I'd like to do this morning is just give you a mayor's perspective from a local community trying to take advantage of the historic investments made possible by the bipartisan infrastructure law. Next slide, please. San Diego is committed to seizing the opportunity to rebuild our city and to transform it into a more equitable place to live, work, and to raise a family. Now that the federal government has really stepped up to provide communities with the funding to build these projects, we need to make sure that we're set up at the local level to successfully deploy that funding effectively and equitably. If I leave you with any particular thought today, I want you to know this: San Diego is here to make it easier and faster to build. And I'm going to talk about a few of the reforms that we've initiated that will help San Diego be set up for success when it comes to building projects more efficiently and competing for state and federal grants from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act. Now, when I was running for mayor 3 years ago, we had a campaign hashtag. Everyone does a hashtag these days, right? Mine was For All of Us. And that was a reflection of the fact that for a very long time in our great city, we are the second largest in California, the 8th largest in the country. We have one city, but really multiple different realities depending upon which neighborhood you were lucky enough to be in. When I took office, I looked across our infrastructure systems, and it became really clear that we needed to improve our project delivery processes, as well as leverage as much external funding as we possibly could. Reminder, this was in the middle of the pandemic. Resources were scarce always, but particularly then. And so it was always the challenge of local electeds to try to portion those resources as equitable as possible. But we wanted to look at doing that in a new way in San Diego, and that meant a focus on prioritizing on historically disadvantaged neighborhoods. My administration has overhauled the criteria for prioritizing all capital investments, as well as adding an equitable lens. An equity lens. You said that 5 billion times over the last number of years. You think I could get that easily stated? Adding a robust equity lens to our annual budget development process, and reformed our funding sources. Our most critical one being development impact fees, which I'd like to talk to you about today. Next slide, please. We call this particular initiative Build Better SD. Before Build Better SD, our San Diego planning processes really lacked equitable funding considerations. And what it resulted in was significant disparities in the funding that was made available for streets, sidewalks, parks, libraries, and other public infrastructure that grew substantially over time, right? These are compounding inequities that just make what you see on the screen as two different sets of neighborhoods compared, obviously a park on the left, road conditions in the middle, and looks like some of our shoreline and other more regional parks on the right. To put it simply, what we have done is under the old processes, funding was from fees that were charged on new development that were locked into the neighborhoods where that development occurred. We have 43 different neighborhood funds, and we accumulated a lot of money in those different funds because of development impact fees that were earmarked for improvements. But the bottom line was that wealthier communities where more of that development was occurring got a lot more infrastructure investment, while disadvantaged communities, typically our older urban neighborhoods, got significantly less. Now, communities that saw less development could only watch in frustration as when they saw infrastructure dollars flowing into other communities, while in their own neighborhood, it really moved at a snail's pace, and that the desperately needed improvements were not necessarily advancing. In fact, they were, I would say, languishing endlessly. Examples of long delayed projects include parks, libraries, fire stations, major road repair projects to relieve, kind of real urgent needs, things like flooding, even in San Diego, congestion, and other things. Even our cross-border communities, one of our undervested communities is a neighborhood that literally abuts the U.S.-Mexican border, and that lack of infrastructure investment is really delaying people's ability to cross the border. And not only is an impact on quality of life for people who live on both sides of the border, that's very common here in San Diego and in the Tijuana region, but also really holding back a lot of trade and commerce, which impacts our economy and obviously the creation of jobs. In total, in those 43 different funds, we had $222 million in unspent funding in all those different projects rolled up, different funds all rolled up together. That kind of capital sitting on the sideline was really an embarrassment. I think, frankly, a scandal. That's money that could be deployed in neighborhoods today, could put people to work today, to address those queuing trucks along the border, could address that busted street you see there in the middle that really makes me angry. I like freshly paved streets, and that one, just looking at it, gets me going. We fixed all of this last year when, with the city council's near unanimous support, we passed Build Better SD, with apologies to the president trying to appropriate some of his terminology around Build Back Better. This now means that our development impact fees are collected citywide. So rather than the 43 accounts, we have just one account. And then we can make the decision as decision makers, what we were elected to do, to put those investments where they're most needed, regardless of where those fees are generated. I believe that what this will result in is a stimulation of private investment in some of those long neglected neighborhoods I was mentioning a moment ago, because as many of you know, without the investment in public infrastructure, it's very difficult to invite private sector investment into those communities. So I think this is going to be a true win. By the way, credit and gratitude to our city council members. You might imagine that sort of fiefdom and those different pots of money, it's kind of hard to give up. But even they could see that their constituents don't live their entire lives in just one neighborhood. They may work in one, live in another. Their kids might go to Little League in another part of town. Point is that this notion that really you only care about one neighborhood was false. And they saw through that. They voted accordingly, and I'm deeply appreciative of them. Next slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm a slide behind, aren't I? Good Lord. I'm better at running the city than a slideshow, just so you all know. Can we advance to the next slide, please? So with regard to the bipartisan infrastructure law, these reforms I just mentioned here at the local level, I believe will help us be more competitive for infrastructure projects, particularly for our more disadvantaged communities. It will help the city meet its requirement for a 20% local match that is generally necessary for a federal grant opportunity. And specifically, I want to point out one particular example where we were able to use this successfully. It's the one you see, that photo on the screen, that handsome guy on the left side, that's me. I'm probably shorter than you thought. And we're surrounded by our incredible infrastructure team and then representatives from the U.S. Department of Transportation. This photo was taken earlier this year. The city was awarded a $24 million grant through the Bridge Investment Program for our bridge rehab, safety, and mobility project on Interstate 805. This is in the southern part of the city of San Diego. This project is going to revitalize a corridor that is in sore need of repair. This actually is not far from the border that I was mentioning before. Through US DOT's investment, we're going to be able to rehabilitate this really aging bridge that's not visible in this picture. That is a park. You're like, Mayor, that's not a bridge. You're correct. The bridge is in the distance. This is where we could get to at a safe distance. One of the improvements that comes with this particular project is a host of motorist and bicycle and pedestrian safety improvements. Busy corridor, aged bridge. We're not going to repair the bridge, but again, make it safer for all travelers of all manners and abilities to get through this very congested area. This $24 million award was helped by having $1 million from the city of San Diego's DIF fund. Again, those developer fees I was mentioning to be allocated for this project, along with other local sources of funding. Some of our other regional partners pitched in. I want to share with you all that if that money wasn't there because of the reforms of Build Better SD, I don't know that we would have had the necessary funding to be able to successfully compete and take advantage of this grant opportunity. And this will now allow us to bring much needed mobility enhancements to this needed community. So we're leveraging local funds with bipartisan infrastructure law funding and other external supports to help us stretch our limited local dollars further and to deliver more projects to all of our communities faster. I think that's what everyone would expect of their government. And in this particular case, I think we're being able to deliver upon that. Next slide, please. So now, while Build Better SD is the headline this morning, I want to let you know that it's just one of the many reforms that we've advanced in just the first few years of my administration. Our Parks for All of Us initiative really does mirror what Build Better SD does in creating a citywide park fund that reprioritizes projects in park deficient areas. Last year's budget, not surprising, when you release cash and make it flow, you can spend more. And so last year's budget, we allocated more funding than ever for infrastructure. Again, some of our local reforms, but also the greater commitments from our state and federal partners help make that bar graph on the right side look as good as it does. But, as mayors, you're never satisfied. You want to see those numbers go even higher because that's more improvements, that's more jobs, that's better quality of life. And we're also streamlining our permitting department to move projects along faster. I think this is what Eric was getting to a moment ago, including a recent executive order that I issued this in January, requiring that all 100% affordable housing projects must be reviewed by the city within 30 days. That's taking us down from an average of 6 months waiting to 30 days. We have a horrific affordable housing crisis in the city. Speeding up that process, time is money. I'm pleased to let you know that our city staff is meeting that new standard of 30 days. The first 4 months of that executive order, we have already permitted 628 new affordable homes, and we have roughly 1,200 more in the pipeline as we speak today. That's kind of progress that's going to put a roof over people's heads at a price they can afford. Again, that's the sort of project delivery process improvements that we're talking about today that's having an impact. And this is in addition to 20 other policy reforms that we've made in the housing space to help us build more housing faster, and particular focus on low and middle income, that sort of missing middle housing. That's probably a concern and a fear of mayors across this country. So taken all together, I believe that these reforms are helping us to improve the quality of life in San Diego and all of our neighborhoods, and the federal support that we're receiving thanks to the bipartisan infrastructure law are really critical to helping us get where we need to go. Deeply grateful to the president, to Congress, to DOT and others for helping cities like mine advance. And I appreciate the chance to brag on my city a little bit, share a little bit about San Diego, invite all of you to come to San Diego. You have a standing invitation. If you're infrastructure nerds like I am, clearly you're on this Zoom right now. Happy to show you some of what we got going on here. But again, Ann, thanks for this opportunity. Look forward to the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Mayor Gloria, for sharing San Diego's experience with us. While the other panelists are coming on screen, why don't I ask you the first question, and reminder to the audience, please add your questions in the Q&A box and we'll get to as many as possible. Trevor Howard is wondering whether there was any pushback on implementing transportation impact fees. Were there concerns with chasing away developers?
I think there was a concern about chasing away developers. Frankly, I think the developers were as angry as anybody about that $222 million just sitting in various accounts. You know, that's money they paid to the city with the expectation that infrastructure would get delivered. But again, when you segment those dollars in 43 different accounts, you just never have enough to actually execute a project. So I think they're actually excited to see the city moving on projects. Again, you know, even if it's not adjacent to the project they're advancing, I think they recognize overall quality of life has improved. Where I would say that the controversy is in communities that have seen a lot of development and the fear that those dollars that were perhaps generated by a project in their neighborhood is going to flow to improvements elsewhere. And again, our theory of the case was that even if that is a problem, the fact is they'll benefit because they're likely to visit that other neighborhood where a project happens. And I think everyone feels better when we compete successfully for our fair share of state and federal resources. Ultimately, as I mentioned, we're able to overcome the political challenges of the council vote and be able to implement this without any litigation, referendum, things of that nature. And it's my commitment, and really it's balls in my court, start putting out those projects. Again, that graph I showed you a moment ago of having the biggest infrastructure budget in the city's history, I think it's a direct line from those policy reforms to getting projects underway. I think whatever opposition there was will subside when they start to see the tangible improvements delivered in their neighborhood.
Thank you for taking that question. For Mr. McFarlane, Terry Masood asks, what is your criteria in New York for which projects you issue as design build and which projects as design bid build, and why?
All right. So we basically do two types of projects. One are the buildings, and the other one is the street infrastructure. Obviously, for the buildings, it's easier to actually do design build because you can actually scope the job. You can more or less price it, which is what design builds are about before you actually get the contract out. And we basically will pick a project that the more complex projects. More complex projects. For example, right now we're using design build exclusively in our building a borough-based jail program. I don't know if you have heard this. We have one main big jail, which is called Rikers Island, which is going to close, and they're going to have neighborhood jails, borough-based jails in all 5 boroughs, and and it has to be expedited. So essentially, we are using design build to actually do this, that type of work. We have the other half of our portfolio is infrastructure work, what we call infrastructure, which is basically street work, right? That's difficult to do because to use that, we're doing a pilot right now to see how we would do this without having progressive design build, which essentially a progressive design build is the ability to go ahead of the main putting a cost on the contract to examine what's on the ground, because New York City is an ultra dense urban environment with a lot of infrastructure on the ground, all the private utilities, electric, gas, telephone, you name it. So you need to understand what's on the ground in order to design build. So without progressive design build, you actually cannot price this. So mostly our design build right now is focused on the buildings. So in the borough-based jail, is one of the, in the first one which I showed was the garage, the $70 million garage.
Hey, thank you very much.
Mhm.
For Kyle Wagenschutz, Sasha Coe wonders, what is the best way to develop public support for transportation policies?
The great news is there's already support existing in cities to support these policies. That's been our finding time and time again, is that we don't actually have to convince people that changing the way their streets work is going to be good for them and good for their neighbors. They just want an avenue to actually direct that support. So instead of thinking about building support, it's how do we capitalize on that support in ways that makes the work that we're doing more effective and allows our communities to actually move faster towards that. You know, are there really clear, defined ways for the public to show up in support of this work? We tend to sort of think about public process as about a way of sort of talking to people. And what we've found in communities is that instead, if we find a way to access that support that's already underlined in our communities, if we give people a reason to wake up in the morning and say, thank you for developing this new sidewalk or this new trail, for fixing this stoplight that I've been thinking about for a long time, there's a lot of opportunity there already built in.
Thank you for that optimistic answer. That sounded like I disagree with you. I don't at all. So Jean Biggs from Beaverton, I think probably Oregon, has a question for all of the panelists. And why don't we take you in your speaking order? Her question is, change is hard. What do you believe led to the success of your programmatic project success across your organization? Please share any advice or lessons learned. And then she comes along a few minutes later with a add-on question. Conflicts within and across organizations are frequent when you make change. How did you address conflicts to find a path forward? Mayor Gloria, you're showing big on my screen. Do you want to go first?
Sure. I'm sorry. I thought Kyle was going first. Well, the internal collaboration piece, right, and then just managing change generally,
Yep.
right? Well, it's fair to say, you know, one of the things I've had challenges with is in discussing the need to invest in historically underinvested communities, and particularly the word equity has been a challenge for a lot of our internal partners, you know, city staff and whatnot. A lot of our infrastructure folks, you know, had to get their arms around that, right? As what the heck does that have to do with filling potholes or providing capital improvements? And so there's a lot of work by my team to, you know, to work with the engineers and the folks who, again, they're that's really not been a part of their world. It's a paradigm shift, and it's been, I don't want to say it's a challenge, but, you know, it's in what is already a complex world of, you know, public funding and agencies coupled with engineering and delivering these huge projects is like another component. But what I was heartened by was after a fair amount of work, they really did come around to this. And I think they understand what we're trying to do. I mean, sort of put it simply in terms of how does equity play out in infrastructure? You know, we have a lot of potholes and we need to fix those, no question. But there are communities in San Diego, you know, since 1850, the road has never been paved, period. So, you know, yes, we may be talking about potholes in one community, but in another community that could be over a century old, we might be finally talking about installing pavement and a sidewalk and a gutter for the first time. So that's what equity is about. And once we kind of got through that, there was real progress. I think just that's an example of the sort of internal challenges and getting past it. I mean, it's probably a lot of the work that Kyle does of just really leveling with folks and trying to bring them along with you. You know, there were other, I think, substantial challenges of just coordination and whatnot. But what I would just say is I'm thrilled that we can have these conversations. Absent the federal investment, I'm not sure we would have had the ability. I'm mindful that the president's administration also concerns itself greatly with equity, with climate action, with worker quality. I mean, these are things that were part of our local initiative, and it was extremely affirming to have a federal government also identify those as key factors, helping to bring not just our internal stakeholders, but the general public along.
Thank you very much. Kyle, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would just add that oftentimes the act of getting everyone on the same page is one of the most fundamental. It's actually the first step in this playbook that we've been using in cities, is establishing a shared goal. And more often than not, when CityThread walks into a community, to ask them, what are you trying to achieve? And we talk to, you know, this department, we talk to another department, we talk to community partners, we talk to local philanthropy. their answers aren't actually the same. They're kind of in the same realm, right? We generally sort of want to move forward, but when we're asking them, what are we actually trying to achieve together? More often than not, that Venn diagram doesn't meet in the middle. And so part of our role is sort of trying to extract and uncover, where do the similarities and what we're all trying to uncover actually lie? What the thing that we can move forward is where we all have a shared purpose and a shared vision and a shared goal together. Without that, we're all running really fast to complete something, but we're all, you know, fundamentally trying to complete different things. And so the first and foremost conversations for communities has to be identifying that clear goalpost, that clear milestone, that benchmark, making sure that everyone understands all the time that that's where we're actually going. And that comes into play as, like, inevitably as we're delivering projects, things are going to pop up. There are going to be differences of opinion about how to move forward. But we found that if everyone is at the table, because we're all trying to achieve something that's bigger than all of ourselves individually, we can actually work through those challenges rather than they becoming further delays, further roadblocks, or even reasons to not move forward. They become just obstacles that we get to tackle together.
Thank you, Kyle. Eric, anything you'd like to add?
Yes, sure. So one of the issues in New York City, you are dealing with a very complex bureaucracy. It is not easy to get anything done. Essentially, one of the things that the mayor did was to create this New York City Capital Process Reform Task Force. That's the first thing that he did when the administration started. And gathered leaders from industry, from private, public, and create this task force to identify what is blocking doing this project expeditiously and cost effectively. And they identified 39 issues, and 30 of them the city can handle by themselves. We have the authority to do it, but 9 of them require state legislation. And alternative delivery, which was last year, that didn't pass. We're going to try again this year. Key support for MWBEs, we got those. Okay, and DDC, Department of Design and Construction, which basically we are a technical agency, mostly engineers and architects, mostly. And so there's no problem with implementing anything that comes down. But the question is, we have to have the authority to do this. And right now, we do not have authority to do alternate delivery methods that would expedite projects. And we need state legislation for that. And again, that didn't pass last session. We're going to try again this year and see if we can get that. That's what's happening.
That's a very important point. Thank you for sharing it. A question for the cities. Can Mayor Gloria and Ms. McFarlane speak to the hidden costs to competing for federal funds? For example, FTEs needed to administer grants, consultants to help draft applications, and other costs of securing federal funding.
Question. We're a big city, right? We have a workforce of 12,000 people. I don't see that as a barrier. I would suspect that my colleagues who are mayors of mid and small size cities, that's probably a more significant challenge. And what I would identify is that, we are in a period of scarcity with regard to talent. We are all fighting for, high qualified folks to come do this work. So it's less about the expenditure, but just about having the actual people. When I became mayor 3 years ago, we had a 20% vacancy rate. We're now at 14%. That's great progress, but that's still a lot of empty chairs where we need people to do this work. And it's at the simultaneous time that there's probably more resources on the table than there ever were. So I don't necessarily see it as a cost, but I do see it as sort of inverse to the amount of hands that are here. And so we're doing hiring fairs and we're hustling. But I'd rather be in this position than sitting here with vacant seats and no resources, right? So, but I suspect my friends who are mayors of smaller cities might really identify with that question and probably have some pointed comments.
I suspect you're right. Anything to add from the perspective of New York?
Yeah, similarly. But as far as cost is concerned, you got to do the cost benefits consideration. We do because of the amount of the number of agencies that are involved in this. Some of them have never done a state request application for funding, federal funding. We had to bring in a consultant that actually can guide them into developing these applications. So, but the cost is minimal. It's compared to the benefit that you're going to get out of this. So that's what we did. We do have a consultant that actually helping us out.
So Kyle, anything you'd like to add to that?
No, those are two great answers. And again, it's one of those challenges that I mentioned when you're sitting at the table working on your goal. Those things are going to pop up, and certainly people power and knowledge right now is an all-time premium, and there's a lot of shifting and a lot of movement. I would only add that in the grand scheme of project delivery and how quickly cities can move, turnover of staff is one of those roadblocks that does often present itself, and it can be, quite the stumbling block in terms of advancing process, particularly for project managers who have sort of sole responsibility for projects, and for them to move on, to bring on a new person and to sort of get them up to speed takes time. And so it's one of those red flags that we look for working with communities in terms of the tenure of staff. How long are they going to continue to sort of be there? We look at those as opportunities to sort of get ahead of and try to head off at the pass.
So since we have you on the screen, question, besides the census-based survey, what other approaches did you find best to get community feedback, especially in underserved areas? That's a question from Michigan.
Yeah, regardless of the area that we're actually in, knocking on a door, talking to a person is the absolute best way to reach constituents, residents, and voters living in our community. And that holds true. It doesn't matter if we're in a very wealthy neighborhood or an area that has long since been disinvested in. People-to-people contact and personal contact is the most effective tool for communicating, for building support, inviting people to show up to public meetings. It's a tried tool. There's a reason that when we're running for public office, our candidates for those offices are out knocking on doors in neighborhoods, because it's just the most effective way to get your message into someone else's heart and in ears. Besides that, the pandemic actually presented quite a few roadblocks to actually utilizing that method. We weren't allowed to knock on doors anymore, so we've moved on to texting campaigns, paid media on buses, on bus stops in communities, direct mailing, and have even gone down the creative route, hosting community fairs, setting up workshops at schools. We even invested in during the pandemic in paid advertising on pizza boxes, because people were ordering delivery pizza, and so we stuck our message and our logos and our branding directly onto pizza boxes. And so when you got that large pepperoni delivered to your house, you were also getting positive information about projects happening in your community.
That may be one of the most creative outreach ideas I've heard in a very long time. Thank you for sharing. I think we have time for one more question for Mayor Gloria. The executive order issued to decrease the process time for the affordable housing developments, which you mentioned. What were some of the major internal challenges experienced to decrease the timeline from 6 months to 30 days? And can you share some of the lessons learned?
I love being asked that. I'm a houser. I love infrastructure too, but I'm a housing guy. And you, not surprising. It just, a lot of pushback. There was skepticism among staff whether or not they can meet that goal. And that's what leadership's about, right? Mayor wants this, let's go get this done. And I have to tell you that they have succeeded, as I've mentioned. And I'm hopeful that's empowering for our staff to consider what else has been previously off limits, but that they could actually do. We did have to get the vacancy rate down. We had to provide some special salary adjustments because obviously if people weren't applying for these jobs, there's something wrong there, right? And we now have vacancy rate in that department down to about 5%. So, many hands make for light work. What we've really discovered, though, in terms of the implementation of that executive order, is it's a lot of hand-holding for permittees. And I think there was certainly an expectation on my part that the private sector would have its stuff together, right? That they would submit applications and plans, fully prepared and ready to go. That just really isn't the case. But rather than lingering in an electronic queue for days, weeks, months, what we're doing now is active program management of really inviting these folks to the table, because at the end of the day, these are the applicants that are delivering apartments that could go for less than $1,000 a month. San Diego one-bedroom apartment average is $2,400 a month. So we see the social benefit in really providing a level of service to these applicants because they're providing a product that we absolutely need. But so once we were able to get over the kind of resistance and fear, once we were able to put the personnel supports in to really staff the agency up and then really handhold these applicants through, the proof is there, right? These are not houses that are being considered. These are houses that in some cases are already under construction, so going from an executive order in January to a groundbreaking last month for a very large project in one of our neighborhoods. This is what we ought to be doing at a time when I think folks, frankly, are fairly skeptical about what the public sector can deliver. Let's prove them wrong and let's build some credibility to be able to do more big and bold things that benefit everybody.
Thank you. And I think the parallels between housing and transportation are really very real and go hand in hand. I'd like to thank all three of you for a really inspiring session about work underway at the municipal level and for sharing your experience and your thoughts. Today, you expanded on one of the key themes that Secretary Buttigieg has stressed: starting projects the right way and planning them well long before construction starts. I hope that you all would be able to join us for our next event, which is Thursday, September 7th, the Thursday after Labor Day, again at 1 o'clock Eastern time. The session will build really nicely on today's conversation. It will focus on embedding equity in project delivery and include talks by Stephanie Wiggins, Chief Executive Officer of the Los Angeles County Metropolitan Transportation Authority, LA Metro, and Emanuela Mertil, Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer at the Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Authority, or SEPTA. So thank you all for joining us today. I would also say there were a couple of very good questions about the environmental review process. We will be having a whole session on that later in September, so stay tuned for that. That's the reason I skipped those questions, not that they weren't great questions. So thank you all for joining us today. Please take a minute to give us some quick feedback. And thanks again to the speakers. We look forward to seeing all of you again after Labor Day. Enjoy the rest of your summer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ann.
Thank you.